A light crossed the ocean long ago. Today, its spirit shines in Ottawa, honoring bridges across traditions. The journey continues.
The article on women in Buddhism from ebuddhism.com calls it a genuinely striking moment for the ancient world, a major religious teacher affirming, in plain words, that women were fully capable of the highest spiritual attainment. And the proof of that affirmation is a text, the Theragatha, the verses of the elder nuns, preserved in the Pali Canon.
And the Theragatha is described as one of the earliest known anthologies of women's literature composed in India. Former queens, courtesans, mothers, all describing their own liberation in their own voices.
In their own voices. That's what makes it so remarkable as a document. And it's the tradition that Devasira Thera was carrying when she sailed to China in the 5th century.
So why did the lineage need to travel? Why couldn't it just stay in Sri Lanka?
Because China didn't yet have a fully ordained Bhikkhuna lineage of its own. And here's the concept that makes this whole story click, what ebuddhism.com calls a chain of hands.
What the Buddhist Embassy Canada is actually doing on Parliament Hill, and why a lineage that almost vanished from history is at the centre of all of it. My guest today knows this territory inside and out, so let's get right into it.
So the place to start is with a question most people haven't thought to ask. What does Buddhism have to do with diplomacy? And the answer, it turns out, is a lot more than you'd expect.
Right, because when most people think diplomacy, they think embassies, trade deals, maybe sanctions, not meditation halls.
Exactly. But according to a piece published in The Diplomat in August 2026, Buddhism has become an increasingly visible instrument of foreign policy. China has positioned itself as a center of Mahayana Buddhist civilization, sponsoring international Buddhist forums, restoring sacred sites, weaving Buddhist heritage into its Belt and Road initiative. India, the birthplace of Buddhism, promotes its own heritage through pilgrimage circuits and lending sacred relics abroad.
So the big powers are using Buddhism as soft power. What about smaller players?
Was the East Asian Mahina tradition, the Dharmaguptaka lineage preserved in China, Korea, Taiwan, and Vietnam.
Which traces back, in part, to what Devasura There brought to China in 429 CE.
That's the through line. The lineage she carried survived in East Asia.
And that's where the Buddhist Embassy Canada comes back in. Because honouring this lineage isn't just a historical gesture, it's a statement about what Buddhism means in the present.
Precisely. And that's the connective tissue between all three threads of this episode. The Devasira lineage is the historical foundation. The Buddhist Embassy Canada is the present-day institution doing the cultural diplomacy work. And the push for Buddhist Heritage Month is the political expression of both.
I want to bring in something that Manjula Wickramaratne said at the Virtual Buddhist Summit, because I think it captures the stakes really well. She said, and this is a direct quote from Hiru News, "This is not just a petition, it is a movement built on years of sacrifice and unwavering commitment. Visita Sirin Leelaratna has achieved what many believed was impossible by bringing Buddhist heritage to the floor of the Canadian Parliament."
And that framing, what many believed was impossible, is important. Because Canada's multicultural framework is often celebrated in theory, but getting a specific religious and cultural heritage formally recognized at the parliamentary level is a different kind of achievement.
It's one thing to say Canada is multicultural. It's another to have a foreign ambassador send a goodwill message to your community summit and have your petition read into the parliamentary record.
Right. And the Thai ambassador's involvement is worth sitting with for a moment. Thailand is a country where Buddhism is deeply woven into national identity. According to the Elanka.ca reporting, the Thai mission in Ottawa views the recognition of Buddhist heritage in Canada as a bridge-building exercise, reinforcing universal values of peace, mindfulness, and social service.
So it's not just the Sri Lankan diaspora behind this, it's a coalition that crosses national Buddhist traditions.
Which mirrors exactly what the Diplomat describes as the model for effective Buddhist diplomacy. Cultural networks over geopolitical weight. You build coalitions across traditions, across borders, and you leverage shared heritage to create influence.
And Canada, interestingly, is positioned to do something that no Buddhist majority nation has done: recognize Buddhist heritage through a secular, multicultural parliamentary process. That's a different kind of legitimacy.
A very different kind. And it connects to what the thesis launch brief on Canada's cultural diplomacy describes as Canada's ability to project its values and foster goodwill through cultural exchange. If Canada becomes the first country with an official Buddhist Heritage Month, that's a soft power signal to the entire Indo-Pacific region.
And the Indo-Pacific matters enormously to Canada right now. Global Affairs Canada's Indo-Pacific strategy notes that 1 in 5 Canadians has family ties to the region, and the region encompasses over 4 billion people and nearly $50 trillion in economic activity.
So the cultural diplomacy work of the Buddhist Embassy Canada isn't happening in a vacuum. It's happening in a context where Canada is actively trying to deepen its engagement with the Indo-Pacific, and Buddhist heritage is a genuine bridge into that engagement.
Let me push back slightly on one thing though. Is there a risk that framing Buddhist heritage as a diplomatic tool, as soft power, strips it of its spiritual meaning? Like, does it reduce something sacred to a foreign policy instrument?
That's a real tension, and I think the honest answer is, it depends on who's doing the framing and why. That's a very different thing from a diaspora community advocating for their own heritage to be recognized in their adopted country.
The intent and the power dynamic are completely different.
Completely different. And what Leelaratna's work represents, at least as described in the search results, is a community asserting that their heritage has value within Canada's multicultural fabric. That's not instrumentalizing Buddhism. That's claiming space for it.
And the Devasira lineage is part of that claim, because it says this tradition has been alive and traveling and surviving for 1,600 years. It didn't start in Canada. It arrived here carrying centuries of history.
That's exactly the argument. And it's a powerful one. A merchant captain named Nandi sailed a group of nuns from Sri Lanka to China in 429 CE. That act of transmission, that chain of hands, is what made the survival of the lineage possible. And now, 1,600 years later, the descendants of that tradition are making a case to the Canadian Parliament.
There's something almost cinematic about that arc.
It really is. And I think that's part of why the Devasira story resonates. It's not abstract. It's a specific person, a specific voyage, a specific moment of transmission that you can trace forward through 16 centuries to the present day.
Okay, so when you step back from all of this, the Buddhist diplomacy landscape, the Buddhist Embassy Canada, the Devasira lineage, what does it actually add up to?
Here's what I think it adds up to. We're watching a moment where a 1,600-year-old spiritual tradition is intersecting with 21st century multicultural democracy and Indo-Pacific geopolitics. And the intersection point is a community organization in Canada that most people have never heard of.
And the stakes are real. If Petition E 6893 passes, Canada makes history. If it doesn't, the work continues. Because as Leelaratna's decade of advocacy shows, this isn't a moment, it's a movement.
And the broader lesson from the diplomat's analysis holds. You don't need to be a great power to practice meaningful cultural diplomacy. Bhutan does it. Singapore does it. Century voyage to a 21st century parliamentary petition.
That's the through line that ties everything together. The chain of hands, the concept that ordination requires a living quorum, that you can't rebuild it from books. That's also a metaphor for what cultural diplomacy requires. You need living communities, living advocates, living connections.
And that's exactly what the Buddhist Embassy Canada represents. Not a monument to the past, but a living link in a very long chain.
So here's the final thought I'll leave you with. In 429 CE, a merchant captain named Nandi made a voyage that kept a lineage alive for 1,600 years. In May 2026, a Sri Lankan-born Canadian advocate brought that lineage's legacy to the floor of the Canadian Parliament. The chain of hands is still being passed. The question is, who picks it up next?
And that question isn't just for Buddhist communities. It's for anyone who believes that culture is a form of power, and that the oldest traditions sometimes carry the most urgent messages.